everyone, it's nice to meet you all. My name is Yuki, and today's topic will be on a game that I beat not too long ago. RPG is one of those genres that are pretty popular, especially when looking for games. There are games that usually have stories and characters attached like any other game, but they usually include elements like quests, items, and character actions that are in a more fantasy world situation or a modern situation. Games like Final Fantasy 15 and Secrets of Mana fall into this category as examples. There isn't really a hard set on how certain games can be an RPG or not, but for this video I'll be talking about a game that falls into this category called Persona 5. To start things off, this piece here is from the game in one of the characters called On Takamaki. For this video, I really just want to briefly talk about the game's art and character. As a little catch-up to Persona 5, the game is created by Atlus and is part of its long series of Persona games, and is the latest one so far. It came out around 2016 and became a hit ever since. There have been a few spin-offs here and there as well, for example, Persona 5 Royal. In my experience, I remember seeing it promoted a lot by its fandom and just by social media in general. As for me, I was really busy with Breath of the Wild, so I wasn't really aware of the game that much and just didn't pay attention to it. But then I bought the game from Amazon as a why not. One point as to why I liked the game was the characters. The game made them fun to watch. The interaction between them was nice and relaxing to see. Since each character had their own card, you could spend time with each of them. From the main character roster, you have the tricky but silent main character, you have the gutsy but comedic Ryuji, the artsy but interesting Yusuke, the brains and classy Makoto, the fashionable Lady Anne, the adorable hacker Futaba, the mascot kitty Morgana, and the questionable Akechi. I have yet to really play Royal and Strikers, so there are probably more characters that I may or may not know, but I do plan on playing the other games soon enough. Even though Akechi didn't join the group till last minute, each character's actions were cool and interesting. When you look at each of the main characters, you can see that they had all been affected by society in one way or another, or through the people of that society. In the end, most of them struggled and made the choice to become another person than who they were before, throwing away their fear and removing those chains that made them suffer. Not only was it because of the choices that they made me like them, but it was also because of their courage. Everyone had a sense of justice that really had me riled up when they agreed to go into a palace. For example, you had Ryuji and Anne versus Kamoshida, Yusuke versus his father figure Madarame, Haru versus her father, Akechi versus his dad, and even Morgana and Joker can be included here. I can imagine how scared they were to go against what was holding them back or suppressing them. Even the uncertainty of not knowing if things would be fine after that event or after that palace scared them too. This idea and emotion being shown to the players while watching this really worked in getting me hooked. The game not only fleshed out the main characters but also the side characters, which were the confidants. Some games tend to sometimes not have their stories pretty fleshed out. I do think that by doing this, it makes it more easier for players to be able to connect and understand what the characters are really going through. I just personally wish that I had more time to explore them when I could, but I plan to go back and change that. For example, Takemi the Doctor. She was a character to go to where you could buy items that could help you through different palaces. In the beginning, she's pretty apprehensive and tries to act pretty sneaky, but once you get to know her, she's a lot more warmer. Her problem was her self-doubt of her being a doctor, thinking as if she could still continue being a doctor. This came from her past in the medical field, as well as losing her drive due to an incident that happened involving a little girl. The next example is Kawakami, the homeroom teacher. Her story is one that I didn't have time to complete in the game, but looked up online. Apparently, she was helping out a student with tutoring, but when things got a little bit sticky, she backed out. This caused an incident to happen involving around the student she was helping, which made them resort to doing maid service as a part-time job for compensation. These two are just some of the many side characters that were explained and shown. Their journeys and struggles really felt strongly to me, and that's a big compliment because not all side characters are usually given interesting stories of hardship. Sure, there are some, but not many. Aside from the characters, other parts of the games also fascinate me, so I'll be bringing this up next. The ones that did was how Kamoshida's and Futaba's castles were depicted, and then also how the final boss and like the whole encountering and battle was like. In the game, the first palace you start to infiltrate is Kamoshida's. Now, as a side note, the only reason why I said that this palace fascinated me was how it was depicted. This character in general, Kamoshida, was definitely wrong in so many ways. Not only was he trying to build his own empire within the school, but he also tried to get along with many girls in the school. And this is just the small amount of things that he's done. Only after entering his palace do we really learn how he truly thought of the school and its students. From the statues to books with the weird names, and then even the hidden door that the player uncovers after a while. I can't even remember the amount of times I said, "Oh no," or "You've gotta be kidding me," because it was just that baffling to me. Is the fact that the palace belonged to someone who tries to be so cool and charming, and also had such a negative and disgusting view of the students. The switch was just so strong between that, and I think the game really showed it well. His boss battle was another thing that interested me. Kamoshida saw himself as a king, therefore the boss ended up being exactly like one. The whole design of this boss is interesting because it just fit Kamoshida and his desires, from the sickening pink to the exaggerated look of hunger on his face. Even the multiple arms of full items showed his greed. Let's not forget his chalice/trophy that was full of female legs just sticking out of it. With that look of greed and the eating utensils, it's not a long thought process of what type of action it would have done with the chalice/trophy. Futaba's palace was the other palace that interests me because of the symbolism once again. Her case was the idea of being scared of finding the truth and justified it by just deciding to hide in her room and then becoming entombed in it. Although for Futaba, her case was interesting for two reasons. The first being the infiltration process and the overall symbolism of her palace. Normally, when the main characters decide to infiltrate a palace, they're the ones that end up doing the investigation and snooping around, and then doing the initiative of sending the calling card. But for Futaba, it was pretty much backwards. She was the one who called them to take her heart. I find this moment interesting because she knew she had to change but just needed the help. She couldn't do it on her own and was scared to. So it was why she wasn't aggressive when the team met her in her palace, her cognitive self. The palace symbolism was nice to see as well too. I liked how you could interpret it in a few ways. For example, for me, I saw the pyramid palace as Futaba's tomb. Usually a person's palace may look very extravagant, but hers was very desolate. Furthermore, I feel that there could have been a few things that could have acted as the pharaoh hidden inside the pyramid that she had. It could have been either her fear of stepping out of her room, her mother, or maybe even her inner self. It honestly could have been anything, really. Now comes my thoughts on the finale of the game. By the end of the game, we learned new things. We realized that there was a bet between Ego and Yaldabaoth. It looks like the main character and Akechi were the main pawns in this bet. Apparently the bet was rigged from the start, last I remembered as well. Things happened here and there, and then we were tasked to beat Yaldabaoth as the final boss. His name had jogged a memory from a while ago because I heard his name from an anime called Arslan Senki. In that show, Yaldabaoth is a god that's worshipped by the enemy. After getting more curious, I found out that Yaldabaoth had a lot of names attached to them. Some are the God of Control, Fake Holy Grail, and the Fool. There are many other names that they go by, but these are the ones that stuck out to me more. Now, I bring them up because not only do I like a little bit of lore here and there, but this was how the final boss was depicted. This battle, I will admit, was pretty difficult gameplay-wise, but also interesting as well. The boss was tricky to handle and beat. The way to beat the boss was that you had to deal with Yaldabaoth himself, and as well as his 4 other arms, 2 on each side. Each arm had its own type of attack and counterattack. I believe that there may have been some pattern, but quite frankly, I just probably didn't notice it at the time. Your party has to be careful because sometimes there are attacks and debuffs that could knock out everyone or everyone but one person. What made it difficult was fighting 2 extra mini bosses on top of basically the main boss. And those arms went on everyone, not just one person. What makes it worse was that if you took out one arm, it can come back in a certain amount of turn. I would probably put this battle on or close to the same level as beating Dragon Maleficent from Kingdom Hearts 1. To wrap things up, I'd like to talk about the art style. As an artist, this game really left an impression on me. Art-wise, I feel that it made use of a minimalistic approach with using a small color palette. Now, usually doing that type of approach is pretty tricky since you have to basically use the colors you're given to create your thoughts from, which could be completely different from the color palette you're given. Another thing about the palette that is evident is when you look at the beginning opening sequence. You'll notice that they used mainly blacks, reds, whites, and a few other colors that were used as accent colors for specific characters. I believe they did this because it fit that limited palette style for one, and also helped create a style and a theme for the game. The reason why I think they picked these specific colors out, which was the red, black, and white, is because they could hold some type of underlying meaning as well. To start things off, we can talk about the black and white. The two color combo really contrasted against each other in the opening, but that's not to say it was a bad combo. Black and white is that type of color pair that's pretty obvious but still is well known and used for a reason. In terms of the reasoning behind the black and white, I believe that maybe the game was playing on the idea of things being just black and white with gray in between. It's the separation of stark colors, but in this game it may be a stark separation of society instead. But I'm pretty sure it was probably for the aesthetic that they were trying to build as well. As for the red, the opening sequence used a very bright red, a crimson red but a bit brighter or neon. The color red does symbolize things like anger, warmth, and passion. I feel this color represented the changes that the main characters created throughout the game. Since black and white is a regular combo, this type of red adds a nice spark of color, hence the change. This color palette brings in ideas like maybe the black and white represents people who need help but can't speak up because they're scared to change things, so the color stays in that monotone black and white. For example, Kawakami. The colors to me just represent the status of people's lives, whether positive or negative. We now move on to another part of the art style that I liked, which was the graffiti-esque type of style with sharpish lines. Now, looking at the speed paint, you'll notice that I also enjoyed the use of thick lines and sharp edges, so it was nice seeing that type of style done more professionally. For me, I tend to lean more on using weighted lines that end up looking kind of sharp edge type of style. The lines take on various weights when I want to show certain areas more attention. I feel that they did the same as well when you look at the concept art and promo art. One example would be the art style that was used for the all-out attack screens. These screens are personalized for each character in the party. They usually come on the screen after a hold-up session is triggered and then an all-out attacks is selected. When you look at the screens, you can see that there's a lot of red and black in the beginning animation, and then suddenly splashes of color with black being a staple color and red being the background color. The heavy black color and the way they used it was interesting to me. Normally using black in general is not something I would usually do since black is pretty harsh even when you use the opacity level to tone it down. But on these screens, they used it pretty well enough to match the art style that the game had. For example, if you look at Akechi's artwork of his all-out attack screen, you'll see that there's not that much shading except for the black shadows at certain parts, which is the area behind the motif illustration and the backside of his character art illustration. This technique is in many of the other character screens. I find it interesting how they were able to create shapes with color in a way that also made the shadows of the said character. Even the shadows make it seem as though the character is popping out of the background as well. I also think that without that black, it would be hard to show the character art with all the color going on in the background from the motif. Notice how the black is the only shading there, so it looks like they used flat colors and then just made shadows from that black. The only other color is a plain white to add some type of highlight as well. I've seen other people use black in this way in pieces like graffiti or pop art. This type of art pretty much interested me as well because black is a color that can be tricky to use because it can overpower your whole piece just like any other color can. Another thing I liked about the screens was how representative they were. They all had their personalities in them, each with its own devious expressions but catchy line. For example, Ryuji's wild personality was shown with heavy graffiti text and bright green and yellow coloring to show his energetic emotion. And then you have Haru's screen, where it had a very flowery feel as if you were in a flower shop, with her positioned as if she were at a fancy tea party. It showed her personality pretty well, and since she loves planting flowers, it really worked well for her. All in all, Persona 5 was an exciting game that gave a look at another type of art style that I admired. The story is well paced and attention grabbing. The characters all had their own stories to say and even struggles. The music even was such a joy to listen to. I would totally recommend this for people to give it a shot. It may be mainstream, but it's really great. I even plan on playing Persona 4 as well soon, continuing down the Persona line of games as well as Shin Megami Tensei. I've become really curious about these games now, and I hope to see more from them. Well, with that being said, thanks for hearing me ramble, and I hope you enjoyed my little rundown / analysis. Thank you all, and I hope you have a wonderful day.